Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Unlocking Math Success for Secondary Math Students. My name is Richard Capone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn. And so today's webinar is going to be very action-packed. It's going to be 30 minutes. We're going to include Q&A in that as well. And so I want all of you to be able to walk away first just having a higher level understanding of why secondary math success is so difficult, and then also how we can potentially help you at Let's Go Learn. But the first piece I'm going to cover is the why, and I think this would also be really helpful for you to bring back to your schools, because a lot of this has to do with some systemic changes that you need to make at your organizations. The math approach needs to be changed a little bit. So I'm going to explain. So here's the agenda for today. Just real quickly who we are, then understanding baseline factors to drive a plan, then case studies talking about how other districts or organizations, what they've done to overcome and really boost math outcomes, and then finally a system demo, and then Q&A. We are endorsed by CASE, which is the largest special education organization of special education directors in the nation, and so just wanted to mention that. Okay, so first of all, who's Let's Go Learn? Well, I founded the company back in 2000 with Dr. McCollum. He ran the Reading Credential Program, which trained teachers to be reading specialists. At the time, our guiding principle was always produce data that is useful at the teacher level. So why is a student struggling in reading or math? What do I do about it? That's always been our guiding principle, and we still do that today. All right. So first of all, the first factor to consider is modern math content is very broad. So here, looking at this picture, it's a little scary, I admit. But what this is you see along the x-axis, it says numbers and operations, measurements, data analysis, geometry, algebraic thinking. And each of those little columns is a scope and sequences of skills that need to be taught. So students need to learn all these different skills and concepts in order to master mathematics, right? Now, if you look at a typical sixth grade class, what they're covering in a pacing guide is that band with the box around it. So they're covering sixth grade content plus a little bit of fifth grade content, right? This is why it's very difficult. It's very broad and there's no time for review. So this is an actual student. These green, bright green lines are the present level of the student. So a typical sixth grader who is non-proficient, right? Just non-proficient, they're going to have gaps like what you see here. And what that means is they need to climb up all this ladder. All these little lines here are skills that are not mastered. And so you see it becomes very daunting if you look at it in terms of a pacing guide, and it's so broad. So this is the first factor you need to consider, right? And this is something you need to share with your teams. That's why you can have these slides as well if you want. The second factor is people have to understand that conceptual mastery requires skills mastery, right? This is in the standards. Modern math standards say it assumes skills mastery. So math is like a foreign language. It has to build on itself. You can't just throw someone into fourth grade French with only first grade or second grade French mastered, because they're going to get lost. So if you look at measurement, geometry, data analysis, and algebra, this is how it actually sits on top of numbers and operations, right? Those are your basic skills. Now, another way of looking at this too is, remember I mentioned the whole thing about when you have skills mastery and conceptual understanding, you get conceptual mastery. So again, this is something to realize. I think a lot of times by the time students are in sixth grade or in middle school or in secondary, they have a lot of conceptual understanding, but they lack some of the skills, and you need both of those to combine. So again, this is something, I've seen this in the data, okay, over and over again. And if you want to have a side conversation about how to convince your teams, send me an email. I'm happy to do that. All right, so again, this is what ends up happening if you don't have this. You have all these gaps, and you can never reach that highest level, which is proficiency at grade level. Now, here's another issue. When students are behind, closing the gap requires 5 to 10x acceleration, okay? Why is that? So we're looking at a bunch of, if you have fifth graders, and let's say only a 30% math proficiency across fifth grade, right? Which is typical. So that means that 50-60% of your kids are going to be 2 years below, right? And then you have some right here that really are at sixth grade, beginning sixth grade, working their way up, and then you have some right in between. So the slope of their learning is very low because they're behind. And so even if you sort of stick with it, they're falling behind just because they're already behind. It's like you're starting to drown. So what you need to do is have this real fast slope to get up to beginning at grade level, and then you can learn at the proper pace. The only way to do this is maybe some kind of and what we're telling our customers now is we recommend doing it during the summer or maybe in the very fall, having an intensive review, but not approaching intervention in secondary throughout the whole year, because that in my opinion, that doesn't work. All right, the other factor to consider is that we think about kids who are behind in math as one homogeneous group. This is 5 random kids. This is real data taken from a 5th or 6th grade class. I apologize, I don't remember. And we just mapped their skills across those 44 subtests I mentioned, right? Numbers and operations, measurement, data analysis, geometry, and algebraic thinking. And you see these 5 kids are in 5 different groups. If you have 30 kids, they probably fall into 20 groups, right? So this means you cannot put them into all your intervention students are behind into a single class and expect a single teacher to be able to do it. You either have to massively reduce the class size, or you need to go to one-on-one, some kind of personalized learning system, right? So again, those are the 4 factors. So modern math standards are broad. By middle school, many students have significant gaps, right? It's because it's so broad, there's no time for catch-up. Conceptual understanding is different from conceptual mastery. Yes, a lot of students, they need to learn the concepts, right, of 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade math. But unfortunately, they probably do. I would argue a lot of kids in 6th grade, they understand volume. They understand, maybe even the idea of an exponent or whatever it may be, but they just lack sometimes the skills in order to get that mastery. All right, accelerated intervention is needed to get students proficient, right? So how do you do that? You're going to have to accelerate. So here are some examples of what some schools are doing. So Ridley, this is an interesting one. They consistently had low math scores. So the first thing they did was they had an intense pacing guide as well, and they recognized that. So they tested the students for 1 year with our Atom data, and they saw that the data was very, very, very splotchy, or splotchy. I don't know if that's the right word. But they were not able to introduce an intervention class into the regular classes. So what did they do? They added a 7th period. And in this period, not all students got it, but they could do whatever they needed. But it was a 7th personalized learning period that they could use, and they ended up using it for intervention for math. And they used our LGL Edge, which is a one-on-one learning program, and they turned their math scores around. Okay. Another one is Downey. They had sort of the same thing here, right? Consistently low scores. Intense pacing guide, not able to do intervention in regular classes. It's because, there's the whole thing of you have to stick to the pacing guide in 6th grade or 7th grade. Large middle school. So what did they do? They use extra PE hours to pull kids out who already met their PE hours, and they had teachers agree to work with them. But they put them on edge, actually. So the teachers just really had to sort of watch them during these PE hours, and then they would basically go onto edge, and they did a massive boost in their state test score, okay, by targeting these kids. Montebello did something else. They had the same thing. They didn't have a really strong intervention or MTSS RTI program at their school, but they had a strong federal programs department. So what they did was they tested the students in the spring, got all the near proficient kids, put them into a 14-day summer school program in math and reading, but they had the assessments already assessed up front, so they can just go into the 14 days and learn. And what they saw, this was 450 kids over 2 summers. Each summer they got about 1/4 to 0.35 years of gain in 14 days. Okay, that's crazy, right? When they wanted to do this, I didn't agree with it. I thought it was too short. And then afterwards I was like, okay, I'm a believer. But again, these kids were very low. So that first probably 0.25, 0.35 years of gain is easier to make. If you're a 5th grader and you're 2 years behind, filling those little gaps will give you some big boosts right away. It starts slowing down a little bit as you approach grade level. But still, it's still impressive. All right, another one, this is a continuing education school, Mountain View and San Jacinto School District. So Dr. Smith, who was the math head, he was using, he saw these kids are not going to graduate. And so because it's a continuing education high school, the principal allows them to run with it. And so what they did was assess each student in our DOMA pre-algebra program, our assessment. They share the report with the student, get them engaged. And once they got engaged, they did a credit recovery based on our edge. Now, originally they did exact path for the kids who were near grade level, but that wasn't really working for the kids far behind. So then they used our Math Edge program for the kids far behind, right? And they literally, some of the kids in 6 to 7 weeks would be proficient. They turn them around. Again, it makes sense because the gaps are tangible. You could fill those skills gaps, but you have to have a program that can do it. All right. Here's the last school I mentioned. This is an interesting one. 0% proficiency in middle school. Students totally lost in the curriculum. Teachers and principals recognized the situation. So what they did was they got permission to drop the standards-based core curriculum, flip the classroom. They moved to a flipped classroom model where the students would be working on personalized learning. And then the teacher would also rotate into groups of 3 to 5 students. Now, I mentioned that one here. It wasn't necessarily our solution with help turn it around, but it was really about changing the model and dropping the pacing guide, right? And so they chose to do it, and they had good success with that. So that's another thing to consider. All right, so I'm going to talk about our platform real quickly, and we'll jump on a demo, and then I am going to show you some AI features as well. So our platform, essentially, we do reading and math diagnostic assessment. Our math assessments are sort of listed there, but they're going to be a foundational math assessment, pre-algebra, and then algebra. Those assessments are taken. Our system figures out what do I do with the student. It creates a math course for each student. And then also the teacher could assign lessons if they want. They can also use it for whole group instruction, because now that you have this detailed data, you can create groups on a daily basis. We also do have formative assessments. So if you are in a RTI situation and you want to do progress monitoring, you can. Any quiz you give updates the baseline data and also updates the automated course. So you're working with a student separately. You teach them, 3-digit by 2-digit multiplication. You give them a quiz. It updates. It pulls any lessons out of our automated course. So it's really, really special. And this is why we're using it in special education, right? Because special education requires that progress monitoring and being able to know whether something's working or not in a really, really easy manner. Okay, diagnostic model. Let me explain this. A lot of assessments are not a diagnostic model. This is a dirty little secret. We use summative assessments in the industry to drive personalized learning, which in my opinion is actually borderline unethical for students who are at risk. Okay, yes, if someone's within grade level, fine. You could use, Renaissance star math. But if they're far behind, you don't want to use something like that to drive personalized learning because it's not going to work. So you see a student, they have different gaps across all these different subtests. Now, what we do is we go up or down to find the actual instructional point, right? In special ed, this is called present level. And so once we find those points, we then know exactly what to do next. So if we look at place value, for instance, the student was right at that point, which means they've mastered expanded form. The next thing they need to work on is 10,000, 100,000 millionths place value, and then decimal place value. So we break it down into discrete skills and concepts. That's what we do across the 44 subtests, right? So that's really important. And each one of these, when we say someone has mastered this, it's not just one question, it's a set of items. When they failed this previously, it's not just one question, it's a set of items. That is what a diagnostic model does, and it's very, very different. Again, this is required in special education. It is in theory required in RTI or intervention, not always used. And it should be used in general ed if your students are really far behind, non-proficient. Okay? All right, same thing, we have this in reading as well, but today we're not talking about reading. All right, let me go ahead and jump in and do a demo. Okay, so first of all, this is our math scores. So if you can see it, this is a class, real class. Student names have been obfuscated. And then what we're doing is we see different scores here, right? These are strand scores right now. So you may say, well, this doesn't look very interesting. How's this going to drive intervention? And it's not. These scores will not, because saying someone is at 6.78 in numbers and operations is not detailed enough to drive instruction. So what I do is I click on numbers and operations, and now I see, it's made up of these 14 subtests: numbers, place value, ordering and comparing, addition of whole numbers, subtraction of whole numbers. All these green scores means the students have maxed out. So the highest score in subtraction is 4.9, addition of whole numbers 4.9. So we see this. But then we see, these students have some different gaps, right? So this is the granular type data that a teacher needs to work with small groups or an automated system needs. So let's take a look at place value. This is an interesting one. If I select place value here, now we see our students within the scope and sequence of place value. These students have mastered it. These 2 are working at 2-digit. These 5 students are working on decimal place value, right? This is my small group. And also this detailed data is what you need for personalized learning. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and click those and assign one of our lessons. Maybe I wanted to accelerate it because I know I want to work on something that requires decimal place value. I could do that. Or I could let the automated course go ahead and run its course, and it'll go ahead and get to those lessons as well. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and take a look at a student as well, we have amazing reports, summary reports, detailed reports, special education reports for finding what goals I need to work on next, right? So we have it all. The general ed teacher would probably use a summary report. The interventionist would use a detailed, and then the special education teacher who needs to write goals and SMART goals would use the special education report. So it's all there, really, really amazing. Let me just click on one student here. We see this is the instructional point of mastery for the students, and we see the red areas. So the students behind in multiplication of whole numbers, number theory, decimal percentages, and ratios. So this is all tangible, right? It's also not bad. I've seen some people share this report with the students. They say, you're right, decimal operations. I can divide decimals, but what do I need to do after that, right? So then they know where they're at, and they can sort of figure out where they need to go next. Now, let me show you something else. I'll show you the special ed report real quickly too. From a special educator standpoint, they may say, okay, let's say I'm going to focus on numbers and operations. We see our present levels, but now I say, okay, what do I work on next? So I'm going to select 3 skills within each area. Now, this is where we have to train the special education teacher to do this. So I would target all the lowest scores first. So Betty will correctly identify commutative, associative, distributive properties. So that's a skill she needs to work on. Betty will use divisibility rules. That's another one. So I would target these 2 that are 5.9. And then in percentages here, maybe I would grab this one and this one here and then this one. So now we have these skills to work on, but this is your skills for the next 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it may be. Now, of course, our automated system will also target the lowest skills first, but maybe you want to write goals on these, or you need to use it in an IEP process, okay? So let me go ahead and show you something else. Okay, so now I'm going to go up to this AI tab, and I'm going to go AI Assistant. So this is what I want to do. So with the AI Assistant, and we're going to have one specially for math, I can go ahead and grab a student, and I could say, okay, for Ricardo, what are the next 10 skills I should work on in the numbers and operations strand? So this is basically what I did in the IEP report, right? I picked out these skills, but I can also just ask AI to do it. So what we're going to do is de-identified, push our data into AI, and it's going to return the results. We store the threads here. Nothing is stored on the AI. It's anonymous. It doesn't know the teacher. It doesn't know your school. All it knows is the first name, Ricardo, and scores get pushed into it. Okay, there it is. So now we see it's showing multiplication, 2 digits, single digit by 3 digit, division, right? So these are the skills that we need to work on next. If I go ahead and, it's a little hard to see. Let me just edit it. So if I wanted to save this, and the formatting's a little funky. I don't know why it doesn't put returns in there. I'll go ahead and clean this up for you. And so one of the things we're working on next is we're actually working with customers to fine tune this stage. So if you say, look, when my teachers ask for it, go ahead, put the skills out. Maybe you want them to list the grade level of each of those skills, right? Because remember how before in the other report we saw it. So you have to sort of fine tune it. But our base AI is able to grab the data, interpret the data, look in within the scope and sequence, and figure out what to work on next. And so you can see here, this is great. These are the next 10 skills I need to work on, and it's probably the lowest skills. So if I can hit these 10 skills, I'm gonna get the biggest bang for the buck on this student. Maybe I print this out, give it to the parents, give it to the student, right? If I was a special education opportunity, I would say create SMART goals for these. Like, it's okay, so here's another thing I can do. Let me show this to you. Let me just save this right now. Okay, so I'll put goals for Ricardo. And these documents are stored for each student. So I'm going to save this as short-term objectives. AI first draft. Well, I reviewed it, so let's say teacher draft. Save. Now, if I come back to my AI assistant, I'm going to click on this. Write SMART goals for 2. So I'm going to grab the last skill within each subtest, 4, 8, and 10. Okay. Assuming I have a SMART goal format as well, right? So if I do it ahead of time, I can actually put a SMART goal format through pre-training, and this is something you'd work with us, and then would know what your SMART goal format is. There it is. Okay, so it wrote it out, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, right? So it wrote this out. Now this is, I don't know if this is the format you would use, but again, it wrote it out for those ones I said, 2, 4, 8, and 10. That's it. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. Let me jump back over to the slides, and then we're gonna wrap up and we'll take questions. Okay, conclusion. Don't be a statistic, right? Become an outlier by doing something different. What I've talked about today is you need to change your approach to secondary math. You can't just stick to this pacing guide. You know, all this lamenting about, oh my God, it's going to take years to turn it around. Our students are so far behind. Yeah, if you just follow the same path, but if you change it, I recommend for secondary to do intensive intervention with something like our EDGE program. Change your model. Develop an educational math model for your own organization. Use technology to your advantage. Hey, the stuff I showed you today is amazing, right? The AI assistant tells you exactly what skills to work on next. So there's no ambiguity about that. And also using something like MathEdge that's based on a diagnostic model is really important, right? So math is ideal for personalization, and I think we really have to do it. All right, those are the questions. So let me go ahead and take a few. All right, I think we're okay on time. All right. I seem to notice you focused on special education. Is your solution okay for general ed? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we focus on special education as a company because special educators understand what diagnostic means. Unfortunately, in general ed, people call Renaissance Learning diagnostic, right? I've heard them say, oh, the diagnostic report from Renaissance Learning. But if you ask them, it's a screener. It's a 15-minute screener. So that's why we do that. But I mean, yeah, we're absolutely some schools use us for general ed as well. And we're using elementary too. So it's not just secondary, but today I'm talking about secondary where you need to sort of change your model. In elementary, you could use us just as a supplemental program throughout the year, but I don't recommend that for secondary. All right, how does your solution, does this solution vary from iReady or ExactPath? Okay, so those two programs, actually I have a slide here. I think this is exact. Okay, this is an interesting one. Sorry, this is a little, again, this is that whole scope and sequence. If you look at programs like iReady, they have scores like 745, 640, 580, 650, 560. This is a single score within numbers and operations, a single score within measurement. That is how they place students in instruction, right? The problem with those kind of programs that aren't based on a diagnostic model is it's not going to place students properly. It's not going to find those peaks and valleys across all these subtests. And so it's not going to be as accurate for kids who are behind. Now, if you have students who are using iReady or ExactPath, and I say they're within grade level, they're very close, those programs might work. But really what we notice is when students are non-proficient or far behind, you need something different. You cannot use, a summative tool for diagnostic where you need a diagnostic. You could use a diagnostic can be summative, but a summative cannot be diagnostic. That's just a reality. Okay. All right. So let's see if we have any more questions. Can you do an annual license versus a intervention short period license? Yes. Normally people typically buy us on a year license, but we do sell 8-week licenses. So if someone wanted just for summer, or someone wanted just the beginning of the fall, you want to do intense intervention, we do have a licensing for that as well. And that's a great question because I know people think about always buying tools over the whole year, but in the case of math, I don't think it needs to be. Can you tell us a little bit about your MathEdge program? Okay, so the MathEdge program, in order to optimize learning, the first got to start with a good diagnostic, right? Once you have that, some of that learning can be done by you. It could be a teacher, it could be other programs if you can direct it. But our lessons automatically get placed based on our assessment. And our EDGE lessons use music, use intonation, use animation, so they're really good. But you do have to position it to the kids because we use music. Now, we think music is really good because it activates the right and left side of your brain and it allows you to learn more easily. It reduces the cognitive load of the student when you have music, right? So that's the program we use, and it's been real successful. It goes all the way up through Algebra 1, so it's a great program. And it's also used in a lot of adult learning programs too. All right, I think we're out of time, so I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much, and we will send you a video recording of this. If you want to scan that as well, if you want to hear from us, and there's my email address. So send me an email. I'm happy to talk strategy with you. I've worked with a lot of districts at the district level on how do I overcome and change my program. And, you know, some of it's not just our program. It's about thinking about your model and really changing things. And so we'll also give you these slides as well. So you can use the slides if you want to extract those first few slides to convince your team that you need to change your model. All right. Thank you so much.